Hi everyone. Obviously, it's a pleasure to start our session with two former elite athletes. We have Caroline Jönsson, former elite professional footballer from Sweden, and Abhinav Bindra, Olympic champion from India. Hi Caroline, hi Abhinav. Thanks for your time. It's nice to have you here, and obviously we have only 25 minutes to reflect on such an important health domain in elite sport. First question, perhaps to you, to both for the audience. Perhaps you can give us a short summary of your sport career, please. Caroline, perhaps you can kick off.
Hi, everybody. I'm a former, but most people call me old, football goalkeeper. My sport career has been from the countryside in Sweden to play in the world team of FIFA. And I've participated in 3 Olympics and the World Cup and the European Championship. Both European Championship and the World Cup, I lost on a golden goal in the final, which means as a goalkeeper, you are the last one that can do anything about it. So that is kind of tough mentally to actually deal with. But I've had a great career in sport, and I also combined my last time in sport with education. So we have a program in Sweden that makes it doable to combine elite sport and studies. So I started to become a psychologist in the end of my career as a football player. I also played abroad in different countries, especially US. Short, but intense.
Abhinav?
Hello, everybody. I'm Abhinav Bindra. I'm a former sport shooting athlete. I had a long career which lasted about 22 years. These 22 years were full of ups and downs, a lot of failures, some success. I won the Olympic gold medal in the year 2008. I was also world champion. But all in all, looking back at my career, which I can do now because I have sort of exited my investment of sorts. I look back at my career with extreme amount of fondness. Sport has been my greatest teacher in life. But more than a few medals which hang on my wall at home, the most important thing is the journey that I had, the relationships that I built, and the memories that I will live on with. So sport has been a great influence of my life in the past, and although I am not so connected to sport, but I use the learnings from sport in my day-to-day life. And whenever I have a tough moment in life currently, I look back at my sporting career and see how I would have handled a certain situation, and I always continue to draw inspiration from what I learned from sport.
Okay, thank you. So obviously in the next minute, we are going to travel a little bit in time. We are going to look at present, at past and the future. And my first question to you, Abhinav, about the present time, what is the connection of you with mental health symptoms in elite sport?
Well, mental health is a topic which is very close to my heart. I obviously, during my career, had a few issues as well when I was an elite athlete. So it is something which remains very close to my heart. I've been a part of the IOC's Athletes Commission, and I'm part of the IOC's working group on mental health. So that is my connection to mental health, where we are collectively working on creating different ways to deal with this situation, because I think mental health is something which has been ignored for far too long. And I think the time is just right that we deal with this in a collective manner and work on creating enough resources to create psychologically safe environments for athletes right from the grassroots level, because that awareness of mental health for far too long has been missing. Whenever we talk about the mental aspect of sport, we've always really focused on the performance aspect of sport, which I think is a big mistake. I think personally, for far too long, I believed in the equation that a gold medal equals happiness. But frankly, that is a flawed equation to be dealing with. And I know that personally, I do know that a lot of athletes continue to believe in that equation, but primarily due to a lack of awareness, a lack of education in the mental health aspect of sport. I think the human well-being of the athlete is often ignored, and I think that the time is just right that the human well-being of the athlete is kept at the heart of high performance. This is something which I'm very passionate about, and now that I've retired as an active athlete, my real connection to sport is on this aspect, where I'm working on different projects and in different areas related to mental health.
And same question to you, Caroline. Obviously, you mentioned that you are a psychologist, so obviously you prepare that properly during your career. Can you perhaps explain us what is your daily practice with patients and with elite athletes suffering from mental health symptoms?
Yeah, I just must say I agree very much to what you're saying before, because I think there is and have been a lack of this support system for athletes throughout the history. And I see a lot of change, and what I'm doing today, I work like in three aspects, I would say. I work as a clinical psychologist within the hospital environment with only elite athletes. And we had three sessions like that in Sweden, where we have departments around the country only working with elite athletes. But that aspect of my work is when the athlete is already feeling mentally despair or in eating disorders or something more severe than what we usually call the support system to handle. So this is like a little bit over that. I would say you're screening high on different tools. So the other aspect of my work is to prevent that. So working much more proactively, and then I have two ways to do that. One is working with Vincent, for example, in the unions. So we're really trying to set the groundwork with conditions for players, athletes around the world to have a more stable and sustainable life situation. So by talking about this type of questions, by setting standards in how you should actually have your performance environment, issues like this should be on the table. And if you don't bring that up, your association or your club or whatever your connection to sport is should. So I think that is a really important part also to work with these issues, is to set that groundwork and the conditions of how the environment you are in is developing. And then the third part is education. I work a lot with psychological education. So you educate the athletes to actually see for themselves, where am I? How do I react? What can I do myself? And where could I go for help? What kind of ways do I have? So those three aspects is where I connect today with the sport. And I think we are gaining in this area, and we are working much more together. But we have a very long way to go still, because I think it's like you said, Abhinav, that still a lot of athletes as well think that if I don't focus on my career 100%, and that means don't have a double career, don't look back, don't reflect on my emotions, I should only win. And if I want that enough, I will be happy. Because that is like the main thing with an athlete's career, is to have that gold medal. And I don't agree. And I think, as you said, it's the journey and how you live your life when you're an athlete that will matter in the longer perspective. So I see a shift, but I still think we're far from it.
Yeah, I think we are on the move indeed. There is an increasing interest about the mental health of elite athletes, which was not the case 1 or 2 decades ago. So I agree with you too. And if you look back on your career, Caroline, can you explain a little bit the change, how it was difficult perhaps 20 years back, in the youth, or when you were starting your career, how it was difficult to be open about mental health issues that sooner or later occur in a career in elite sport?
I think it's also, for me, I must say I was a bit surprised. I think I come from good conditions, a family which is loving and on the countryside. And I was really surprised throughout my career how many of my teammates, especially when you surround yourself with a team, so you live with them, you travel with them, you see them in everyday life, how many of them that were struggling. And they saw that as normal. Like it wasn't and nobody saw it as abnormal. It was like, and in one way it's great to live with people, to see this all type of different environments and how people react, because your normality of course grows, which means you can also look at yourself as more normal, even if you have strange behaviors. But still, there was a lot of people suffering, which I saw was something we could do something about, and it was never talked about.
And what did you observe? What did you observe? A different behavior, or perhaps a different physical appearance? Because you mentioned, for instance, disordered eating, or perhaps
exactly.
People.
I would say both, like eating disorders, in how we talk about tests, for example, and the weight itself as an isolated factor of actually your results. And when we were in the Olympics, we actually had tests where your weight was so important for your test results, and your test results was then linked to how much support system you could get. And in some sports, it's actually good to have a little bit of higher weight, so to speak, on the field in football, for example, but not in the test. So there was a very much, I think, a paradox where you didn't look at the individual sport; it was just an overall test, and that actually created a lot of eating disorders, or at least feelings and thoughts about eating that wasn't healthy. Then not everybody developed to an eating disorder, but it definitely an eating problem. Mm-hmm. And then you also had the situation of OCD, for example. A lot of people say, hey, yeah, that's normal in sport, you need that. Yes. But actually that's a big problem. And it also was very, very much inflecting their normal lives. So not just in your sport environment, it actually developed to transfer to different environments in life, and it became really isolating. So, and that was also kind of seen as normal. And then, of course, you have...
Yeah, no, sorry, go ahead.
Now you also have a power situation of coaches and things like that. And the relationship issues became also very special, because your self-awareness was sometimes just thrown in the basket because you were supposed to do as the coach said. And that takes away a lot of your self-esteem, I think, but also your both awareness and how you look at yourself as a person of value. And that also transfers into life. So those things, I think, was very normal in sport.
You spoke to relationship, obviously very important when you are performing in team sport, and I'm sure it is perhaps different within individual sport. As you, Abhinav, different dynamic, obviously different environment. Can you perhaps explain how mental health symptoms might occur in your sport? Because I guess you are training a lot on your own.
Yes, it is a very lonely sport per se, because a lot of training is done on your own, and also the competitive environment is always about competing against your own self. And I think shooting sport is a sport a lot to do with self-control, and I think a lot of times what shooting athletes in particular can make an error is that they in order to perform well, they try and suppress their emotions, and I think yes, that control is needed while competing, but it is not a sustainable way to perform, and I think when you continue to suppress emotions and you continue to bottle these emotions up, it is certainly going to have some psychological issue will definitely crop up. So I think that is one of the dangers. I think another the mental side is also related to the physical side of sport, because I think it's a circle, and everything's interconnected. And certain shooting sports are, it's all about stillness, and it's all about keeping as stable as possible. So a lot of athletes also train a lot on the shooting range, where we're just keeping still. And the human body is really not built to stand still. The human body is really built to move. And some athletes are not able to find that balance, because they think that just training more on the shooting range is going to get them better performance. But that's not true. Shooting is actually requires a good amount of physical movement and physical skills as well, because just staying stable is a very challenging physical activity, because it's almost against nature. So finding that balance, I think, between the physical and the technical side of sport is important. And of course, the whole area about bottling up your emotions in trying to find that self-control, I think is a big red flag. I think it's about riding the wave. There will be ups and downs, but you can't just make that mistake of bottling yourself up, because it's a very meditative sort of sport. It's a very quiet sort of sport, and if you continue to bottle up emotions, then it also starts to affect your personality outside the field of play. So it is about trying to strike that balance, which sometimes is challenging, specifically in the sport of shooting.
And regardless, obviously, the sport disciplines, I think there is still a stigma and a taboo, as you mentioned, about mental health symptoms in elite sport, and we need to do more, among which education, as mentioned by Caroline. Abhinav, if we look a little bit further in the future, which kind of challenge are ahead of us in the future? What we need to tackle principally in order to take a step further?
Yes. Before going into the future, I just like to say one thing about the history of mental health. I think one of the biggest misconceptions of athletes is that they are mentally very strong people, and they are almost immune to any kind of mental health issue or mental health disorder. So I think that is a big misconception that the general public has. When they look at athletes, they say, oh, they will not have any mental problems, and that is a big issue. I think that lack of awareness and lack of knowledge that athletes are human beings first, and humanizing the athlete, I think, needs continuous work. And I think the pandemic, the COVID-19 crisis, has been a challenge, of course, for athletes, but for the rest of the world. And I think that has opened up conversations a little bit, even in sport, because normal people are sitting in lockdowns and things like that have found it mentally very challenging. So I see a lot of shift in conversation, and more people involved in the whole sporting ecosystem are also accepting the fact that this is an aspect which needs to be carefully dealt with, even in the world of sport, in the world of athletes. But I think going into the future, this will be constant work. It is also about creating the right environments for athletes. It's about creating those psychologically safe environments, because it is a high pressure sort of environment that we live in. Coaches are always answerable. The support staff, their jobs are depending on it. Everybody is after a result. And that, again, has the potential to create unsafe environments for the whole structure. And I think just more awareness on this aspect and creating the right environment will continue to be the challenge. But I see that more and more people are acknowledging this. And once they really start believing in the aspect that athletes are human beings first, and that their human well-being has to be the priority, and if that is the priority, then the performance will automatically follow. So it's just, I just like to end by saying that this is a continuous work which needs to be done. More awareness needs to be brought in, of course, at the athlete level, but also at the leadership level of sport, because sometimes a lot of pressure is put on into the environment, because the leadership in sport wants results. You set targets of an X amount of medals that you want to win, and that's all right. But in the process, we must not forget the whole human aspect of this whole endeavor of an athlete's journey.
Yeah, good challenges in front of us. And perhaps from a more clinical point of view, Caroline, what do you see in the future for challenge? Do we need to educate as well health professionals who are working within the environment of elite sport, or which other challenge perhaps do you see?
No, I couldn't agree more. When you're speaking, I just want to build on it, because I really think that is such an important part to educate not just the athlete, but the athlete surrounding and support system. Just the example you said about the shooting and how your physical abilities and your mental abilities is connected. And when I just teach athletes about that, it's like their shoulders goes down, because the normality of this is how we work as human beings, work with it, not against it. That type of reshaping and understanding helps a lot. But they don't even know that. So I think that combined with actually educating the support system is really, really important. But I also think when it comes to the stigma, the pandemic is definitely helping, I'm sure. And in FIFPro, we've done some research, and also in Sweden we've done, and it opens up the conversation. But what I also think will help in the future is the social movement. Athletes has also been seen as, you shouldn't care about social movement, you shouldn't care about politics, you shouldn't care about anything. You're just an athlete and you're there to perform, and you're kind of faithless except on your performance in sport. And seeing now athletes also challenging the political system, the social movement, that also makes them more human. Mm-hmm. And in that aspect, you can also look at the human being before performance. So I think that's also something that opens up for the stigma around mental health. So I think that's also going to help in the way forward. When it comes to the clinical settings, we do have a problem, and also I'm challenged a lot with, should we even have a specific area in the hospital context for only athletes? Why? So I also think building within the system of healthcare some form of understanding that the context of athletes are a bit different. And if you understand that context, you can move so much faster. But the bottom is they're human beings. So that's why we should be in the same system. And then you have context like addiction, like sport, like anxiety or borderline, or it's just like your knowledge about that area specifically that makes the process faster. So I see that as a clinical challenge, which even in Sweden we are facing, that athletes are seeing like, why would they have a special clinic or so? So it's also a challenge within the clinical system, I would say, where you see athletes that's more, as you said, more performance driven, and they should master mental health better. I think it's changing, but it's been a challenge also within the clinical setting.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously we are on the move. We are moving in the right direction, but we are not there yet, and there is many things that will consist as a challenge for the future. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Abhinav, for your time. I know it's time is too limited for your input, and but nevertheless, thanks for your contribution. It is very appreciated.